So dear friends, we are still glowing in the good news of the two auxiliary bishops that are going to be ordained. And as you may have already heard, we have kept a great day for them on 24th of August. It's Saturday and the ceremonies will begin from the 9 o'clock onwards. So keep a day free, and surely this will be once in your lifetime chance, as it were, to attend an Episcopal consecration in the city of Bangalore. Both the candidates, Father Rukyaraj Satish and Father Susanathan, are preparing themselves. They have to go for a retreat. They have to spiritually prepare themselves, and surely it's going to be a God-given experience for them and for all of us. For this week, we have a beautiful message. God provides. God always provides. And the message is of bread, or perhaps food for our body. You know, food is one of the basic necessities of the human person. And we cannot do without eating, without drinking. You know, in Hindi there's that beautiful expression, roti, kapda or makan. Roti means bread. Kapda is the clothes that we wear, and makan is the shelter that we have, a house, a home, perhaps somewhere to live. These are the important necessities. And so today's gospel speaks about bread, or the food that God provides. God provides in His own time and to His own people. It's only that we have to trust in God, trust in providence. And the beautiful miracle that we see, what we call the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. You know, for a needy person, bread is necessary. For a poor person, he hungers, he waits, he looks out. And, you know, Mahatma Gandhi has a beautiful saying, if God were to come today for a poor person, it would be in the form of a bread, which means God never abandons. So the miracle of the multiplication of loaves that we see in the gospel today, as you know, that Jesus was preaching, and there's a big crowd that is there. And after the perhaps preaching, you know, the people have to go back, but they have come from miles. And Jesus asked Philip, where are we to bring the bread for these people to eat? And Philip answers Jesus, 200 denarii would not be enough to buy food or bread for all of them. But then Andrew, who has heard this conversation of Jesus with Philip, perhaps tells Jesus, there's a boy here. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. But then he himself expresses helplessness when he says, but what are they for so many? And Jesus tells them to make the people sit down and distribute the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, and they have distributed, and the gospel says there must have been about 5,000 men besides the others that were there. And interesting is, after this everyone has eaten, Jesus says, collect the extra, perhaps so as not to go waste, and they collect 12 baskets full of bread that people have left behind. What is 12 baskets of bread that is taken over and above? And they have started with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. That's how perhaps Jesus wants to show that God doesn't abandon His people. You know, the first reading also has that beautiful message from the 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 42 to 44, where Prophet Elisha also has a similar experience of the servant of a man who comes to the servant of Elisha, and gives him some barley loaves and some fruits. And the servant says that, how can I feed the people? There are 100 people here, how can we feed them? But all the same, the prophet Elisha tells, give those bread to these men, that they may eat. For thus satisfy, says the Lord, that they shall eat and have some left. The second reading also speaks of St. Paul in the letter to the Ephesians. He says, I am a prisoner, but I would urge you to walk in a way, in a manner worthy of your calling. Our calling is to follow Jesus also in these needs and perhaps a special charisms that Jesus expresses himself. What's the meaning of this parable? What is the meaning of this miracle for us? I would say 4 small things. Number 1 is God provides. The providence of God. Sometimes I have to go to some of our boardings and the director is very much worried. We have a boarding like this in Naganpalya where Father Vivian is looking after 92 children. And perhaps he has that thought, who will feed them? Surprising. He says that people come and give. People donate something. There are benefactors who are giving us. God doesn't abandon the people. God always provides. Secondly, it's interesting to note that, the little initiatives always are little miracles. The miracles of little initiatives. Andrew takes this initiative. He knows that it's a helpless situation, but I give a drop of water. I give a small piece. And therefore he tells Jesus, there's a boy here, perhaps not useful for us, but he has got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And Jesus works out his miracle from this little initiative. Thirdly, little is much for the Lord. Your little is much for the Lord. Do you know that? Perhaps many very often think that I have nothing to give to the Lord. I am not worthy. I am not possible. It's not good for me. What can I give? There are so many people. Mother Teresa would say, a drop. A drop is still a drop, but it is something for the ocean. The ocean would be less than 1 drop if you don't drop it. So therefore, every initiative of yours, the small things matter. The small is big for the Lord. What Jesus wants is not your things. Jesus doesn't want your possessions, but your heart. Openness of your heart. Very often, sometimes in gatherings, we find such people. When we say that it's not possible, it's not going, we cannot collect so much money, we cannot build a big church, we cannot have this thing. Small initiative. Small things are beautiful. Small things are great. And finally, I want to make a point also about what's called the leftovers. There's nothing that is left over for the Lord. Everything is useful. And so in our life, there's nothing that is left over that we throw about. Everything is useful. And there is a symbolic meaning for these 12 baskets of leftovers that were collected. And normally, if your stomach is full, you don't want to eat again what is extra. And therefore, you give it to the others. And therefore, these 12 baskets represent what God would give to the others. Namely, evangelizing the people who are on the periphery, who are on the outside, may not be inside, because the people have had their fill, the full. And so this is for the others. So this is a beautiful miracle that Jesus made to teach us not only about our food, about our personal needs, but also that God can provide and that God works miracles among us through small initiatives. And every small bit that we give, 5 fish and 2 loaves, are so much. And the extras that are there is also for the world, as it were, for evangelization. I now take you to what's called the Grandparents' Day. The feast of Joachim and Anne is called the feast of the elderly and the feast of the grandparents. And Holy Father Pope Francis, perhaps, he is also aging. And he knows the pain, the suffering, the solitude of the elderly and especially our grandparents. And so beautifully, he sends a message every year. And this year's message is something very special. He says that he tells the old people, God never abandons his children. Never. This is first line. And quoting Psalms chapter 71 verse 9, he says, do not cast me off in my old age. It's terrible to be old. It's terrible to be sick. And the people who are perhaps experiencing it, they tell us, and we can see it also, because we live in a world that is called use and throw. The old people are no longer useful. They have finished their shelf age, if you want to say it in that way. But at the same time, you think they are not useful. They are a burden to us. Some even would say that they eat away the savings of the young. They are a burden for the young. And why should we take care of the old? Perhaps we say use and throw. We take care of them. But Pope Francis says, God discards no stone. Indeed, the oldest are the firm foundation on which new stones can rest in order to join the erecting a spiritual edifice. He quotes 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 5. So therefore, the Pope considers the old as the foundation of our life. There is a Psalm of 71 verse 9 says, in my old age, do not abandon me. And the psalmist, as it were, says that there is life, and this life in abundance even for the old. The old need not be discouraged. Even if your children, even if the others have abandoned you, God will not abandon you. And the fears, the old people have two great fears. One is fear of abandonment. There are many times perhaps the family is not able to, especially in the cities where the nuclear families, there is hardly one room, two room. Where do you keep your old people? And sometimes you have to take them to the old age home, perhaps even abandon. There are some who abandon them, I would say, mercilessly. So then number one is fear of abandonment. The second is loneliness. Loneliness. Of course, if both the husband and wife are alive, they at least can perhaps fill up each other's lives in some way, some conversation, some needs that they can perhaps fulfill with each other. But if they are alone, only grandpa, only grandma, a sign of loneliness. There's no one to talk to them. Perhaps the grandchildren would come and play a little, but the parents, they know that the children are far away, their children are growing, their children are working, they have their own life. So therefore, these are the two great fears of the old people. And as I said many times, the accusation is the elderly rob the young of their future. And that is what people think, that is going to be a big pain for us to look after the elderly. And therefore, perhaps today we have to say that solitude and abandonment have become recurrent elements in today's landscape of the living, of the families. And that is why perhaps our old people need to be prayed specially, to be given company specially, to be kind to them, to be merciful to them, and at the same time to make their life, I would say, a little more happier than what it is, especially in their old age. The Holy Father's last wish, perhaps I would also like to wish in the words of the Holy Father to all of you. The Holy Father says, dear grandparents and elderly persons, and to all those who are close to you, I send my blessing, accompanied by my prayers, and I ask you, please do not forget to pray for me also. So this is the message that the Holy Father has sent, and let us celebrate this day on 28th, that's the next Sunday, the Sunday wherein we celebrate also the feast of Joachim and Anne. In some way, perhaps we can also remember our own people, old people, the elderly people, our grandparents. There is a suggestion made, perhaps, as I would say, some discussions are going on in our diocese to create a forum for senior citizens at the Archdiocesan level. There are some people who have come forward, knowing the needs of the old and the elderly, especially the grandparents, first of all, to celebrate their day at the parish level, at every parish, to celebrate bringing the elderly together, and in some way, some mirth, some fun, some memories, some games, something for them to be happy about. Beyond this group that has come to us is also discussing about forming what we call parish units of the elderly. Perhaps in a parish like, let us say, Ascension Church or Holy Ghost Church, there are many old people are there. And therefore, perhaps we can call them once a month, a group that takes charge of them, perhaps a small sort of gathering of those. And see the benefit. There are other things also that can be seen of, because sometimes the elderly, the old people who are retired are to get the benefits from the government. Someone can work for them, the old age pensions, and perhaps some medicines, someone to visit them. So these are all things taken up of the group, and therefore I would encourage that in every parish there is a unit of this elderly or the grandparents as such, that can be perhaps on the parish level, on the deanery level, on the diocese level. We can also have a sort of a commission or desk that takes care of all these people. At the same time, some office bearers from the diocesan side, perhaps some priests to help them and support them. I would welcome in this regard your suggestions as to how to go about, and surely we are there to care for the senior citizens. There are two great feasts that are coming up in these months. The feast of St. Alphonsus Liguri and the feast of St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius, the feast is on 31st of July, and St. Alphonsus Liguri on the 1st of August, perhaps just there. We can see, I make a mention of them because they are like, in the cricket team we call the stars, star batsmen, star players. So these are the stars of the Roman Catholic Church. Of course, there are saints, there are so many thousands of saints, and each saint is a special one. But these two shine, or perhaps they have created a lot of impact on the generations of priests and religious, and also the people as such. Let me start with St. Ignatius of Loyola. Ignis or Ignatius or Ignis means fire. This man was born with a fire. He was born, as you know, on the 23rd of October 1491, and he lived about 64 years, and he died on 31st of July 1556. And as a saint, as a man of God, he was a fiery person. We have heard many times his story of how perhaps he was studying at a later age. He started his studies because he knew that to found a congregation of the Jesuits, a Society of Jesus, which he founded in the year. He founded the congregation at quite a young age, but he was quite senior. And then he knew that he had to do some studies, he had to do some education, so to train his friends, his companions who were trying to join him. And one of his famous companions was St. Francis Xavier. St. Francis Xavier was so much enamored with this older companion of his. And this particular man, as it were, was so much fond of St. Francis Xavier that he admired him and said, "You have a lot of ambitions, and an ambitious man as you are, but what does it profit if you gain the whole world and lose your soul?" That was enough for St. Francis Xavier, repeated again and again, in order to perhaps to feel the urge to himself to follow God, and he was one of the first companions of St. Ignatius. And as you know, the Jesuit fathers who have inherited this charism from St. Ignatius and the other fiery Jesuits are all over the world in different ways, in different means, in different capacities, in different apostolates. Education is one of their forte, as it were, and they have a lot of institutions. And we know in Bangalore, we are fortunate to have the St. Joseph's University, St. Joseph's College, and so many other institutions that are run not only in Bangalore but all over Karnataka. So therefore, we wish the Jesuit fathers a very happy feast, St. Ignatius of Loyola. I now take you to what we call the second saint, St. Alphonsus Liguri. I would say another star of the church, because St. Ignatius had this fire of what we call the burning of his soul, as it were, for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of the missions. St. Alphonsus saw each one's individual. He was a moral theologian. He had his own perhaps feelings of guilt and anger and the other passions, and he could judge and he could see through the person and say that a person's interior has to be purified. So therefore, St. Alphonsus Liguri, as we know, he was born on 27th of September 1696 and lived up to, he died on 1st of August 1787. He was first a priest and a philosopher himself, a moral theologian. He became a bishop. He died, as I said, in 1787. He founded what we call the Congregation of the Redemptorists in the year 1732, called the Congregation of the Most Holy Redeemer. And his charism was not only preaching, but as I said, the cleansing of the soul, the purification of our moral life. And therefore, he started this congregation in order to give a living foundation to the lives of the people. In his own time, he attracted many of the followers, and for them he gave a philosophy of life that we are ones who can show the way of the Redeemer to the others. We call them Redemptorists. And I wish our Redemptorist fathers of the Holy Ghost Church and the others a very happy feast. And we know the Holy Ghost Parish is one of the leading parishes in our diocese, and we bless the ministry, the apostolate of redemption, of preaching, of proclaiming that the Redemptorists do not only in Bangalore but in other parts of the country and the world. I make a little reference to what we call the Jubilee year. As you know, the Jubilee year is going to, and the 2025 is considered the Jubilee year, the year of the Jubilee. And it starts somewhere in December, goes up to next December. Perhaps, as far as I know, it goes from the 24th of December this year to 6th of January 2026. So therefore, almost 1 year. And the Holy Father's office has already promulgated what we call the Jubilee year, how it's going to be celebrated, and especially made a reference of the indulgences. Some people know what is indulgence. Indulgence, in short, is a priceless gift of divine mercy, and it's one of the special signs of the Jubilee year. So the indulgence is grace that God gives for certain actions that we can perform, which the Holy Father prescribes for us. So therefore, a Jubilee grace which allows us to discover God's limitless mercy. And so, the next year being the year of the hope, we call it, we are called the pilgrims of hope. And the whole year is going to be the year of hope. The last year was the year of learning. This year is the year of prayer. And the next year is the year of hope, as it were. And therefore the Holy Father has got some suggestions for us as to how we can gain what we call the plenary indulgences. There are 3 ways very specially. The first one is what we call the pilgrimages. And the pilgrimages we make, first of all, let us say, to the real places of our birth, of our spiritual birth, of our religion, of our faith. That's the city of Rome, with all the basilicas there, and also perhaps the Holy Land where Jesus was born. So these are the pilgrimages that we can make, and pilgrimages of hope, we call it. The Holy Father also adds the other basilicas all over the world. For example, the basilica of the sacred places like Assisi, Loreto, and some of the national shrines of perhaps we call Guadalupe, Medjugorje, Velankani perhaps. And so these are the national shrines which we can visit and also gain indulgence. The third one is very interesting. It's very interesting that the Holy Father thinks beyond our going to our places for pilgrimage, which is easy and which is liked by everyone. The third way of gaining indulgences is also, as I said, by works of mercy and penance. This is something new. Because when you do some work of mercy and offer it, the Holy Father says you can, in the year of the grace, year of hope, in the Jubilee year, you can also gain indulgences. The faithful will be able to obtain Jubilee indulgence if with a devout spirit they participate in popular missions, spiritual exercises, formation activities of the Church. And despite the other instances, the Holy Father makes a mention that even works of charity, the works for the poor, visiting the sick, doing works of mercy, corporal mercy, can also gain us indulgences which we can apply for our own self or for the others. And every act is an indulgence, a special indulgence that we can gain. We can offer for ourselves or someone, perhaps we can think of our parents, our departed ones that we can offer. There are small conditions. First of all, we have to recite the creed to say that we establish or rather we firmly believe in the Church. And there's one Father, one Our Father, one Hail Mary that we offer for the sake of the Holy Father's intentions. And if possible, we receive the Holy Communion also and receive the sacraments after having done a good confession. So these are the things that are required to obtain indulgences. Finally, I come to what's called the jewel of the Archdiocese. The jewel of the Archdiocese, which is something special for us, and we also take pleasure to say that perhaps our diocese, as we said, is decorated with small jewels. And this time I'm going to speak about the jewel of our Archdiocese, since the feast of St. Ignatius is close by. St. Ignatius Church, Bangalore, is our special jewel that I would like to mention. As you know, it nestles in that city, what's called the Silicon City, close to the Silicon City, and it's a big parish. Surely the people have a good history, a long history. I shall just mention to you certain points of this history so that you can locate the church and the history of the church, and you can regard it why I referred to it as a jewel of the Archdiocese. You know, the Christian presence in Bangalore dates back to the time of Hyder Ali. This was 17th century. And when Hyder Ali was ruling part of Bangalore, there was a military camp at Santa Bidi. The soldiers had a small tent chapel to pray from 1961 to 1782, and the tent chapel was the first church in Bangalore. The ministry of the MEP fathers, which was spread all over the Archdiocese and also what we call the Mysore mission in so many other places, began also, and the Jesuit congregation was suppressed, and that's why the MEP fathers took the charge in 1773. When the MEP priests came to Bangalore, there was already a church in Bangalore. There was already a small church in Bangalore. A small hut church was built in the year 1810 in the present church compound, but the Christian presence in this village of Bangalore dates back as much as 1810. Prior to the first church in the compound, the sacramental ministry was organized by a catechist who traveled from Chikkaballapur to Anekal, and the ministry of the catechist dates back to 1775-1780. We have to appreciate the work of our catechists. That time when the priests were not there, they were the ones perhaps who went and encouraged the people, taught catechism, and kept up the faith of the people. One of the High Court orders mentions, order number 05446/89, that there was the Roman Catholics were present in Bangalore village. They used to bury the dead in the Catholic cemeteries situated outside the village, and somewhere in 1925, the approval of the High Court order in the case between state of Karnataka versus people of Bangalore mentions of the Christian presence in Bangalore. Bangalore was one of the villages that is mentioned in the pastor ministry, so the missionaries who travelled from Shettihalli to Tirupatur. In 1742, under the leadership of Father Alexius Smaraldo, people celebrated the feast of St. Francis Xavier, and to celebrate this feast, people from all over, especially the villages of Bangalore, Chikkamanalli, Kamanalli, Somnalli, Kanakapura and Harabale came for the feast. In 1773, the Jesuit congregation was suppressed, but the MEP fathers took over, and they did a wonderful service to the people of Karnataka, especially in the Mysore mission. In 1881, as I've said, the first church was built, and Father Jarige was the first priest who regularly came to the village of Begur for pastoral ministry, and eventually he became the first parish priest in 1847. The other fathers whose name need to be mentioned: Father Jarige, MEP, Father Monteraud, Father Renaudin, Father Bouquet, Father Zakir, Father Yernau, Father Rouse, Father Faisandia, Father Capella, who is still remembered, and the local priest afterwards took over. The second church in 1862 was built by Father Renaudin, and this is the church was in the shape of the cross, which was inaugurated on 16th of September 1862. Bishop Charbonneau and 5 priests and around 300 to 400 people were supposed to have been present at the inauguration of this church. The third church was built in the time of Father Antappa of late happy memories, and the new church built by St. Antappa was dedicated to St. Ignatius. The foundation for the third church was laid on 2nd March 1959 and was inaugurated by our first Archbishop Thomas Pathakumari on 15th of December 1960. So what we have, the new and the beautiful church, is the fourth church. And this church, as you know, was a dream project of the Begur people, supported very much by the Archdiocese and the priest. Father Sagai Raj, who is now in Dorsan Palya, is the one who started this church. He did most of the work, and since his term of office was over, he had to be transferred to another place, and Father Sebastian Arukyaswamy took over from him and completed the new building of the church. The new building of the church was inaugurated for good fortune of the church and the parishioners that the Apostolic Nuncio, Most Reverend Leopoldo Girelli, was with us, and he inaugurated the church on the 23rd of April 2022. The building took almost 5 years to be built. The foundation was laid on 13th August 2017 by our Archbishop Emeritus Bernard Morris, who was also present for the inauguration of the church, and I was also there. And this is how the church, the new church, stands, a beautiful monument, a beautiful church, spacious enough for the people. All credit to our priest, Father Sagai Raj, and Father Sebastian Arukyaswamy. I thank the people also for their contribution which they have given in order to build this church. There is a grotto in the parish premises which perhaps needs a little special mention also, because this is considered as a miraculous statue by the people of the Our Lady of Lourdes in the church campus. The grotto is the thanksgiving of the people of Begur for the prayers received by the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Prior to 1944, there was famine in the village of Begur, and people in large numbers, fearing this particular famine and disease, came to considered were helpless and came to seek the help and intercession of Mother Mary. The entire village prayed to Mother Mary for healing and better life, and they received their prayers, and the life of the people improved a lot. Miraculous cures are even reported by the people who say that my grandfather was saved, my grandmother was saved. And at that time, the one who took a lot of initiative was Father R.P.J. Gratian, who built this grotto and inaugurated it on 1st August 1944. And ever since, the grotto remains there. They also celebrate every year the feast of the grotto, is as it were, the what we call the celebration of Mother Our Lady of Lourdes feast at the grotto is also celebrated much. And even today, there are a lot of people who have devotion to Mother Mary, have experienced small cures and miracles perhaps. So therefore, this is Begur. This is St. Ignatius Church Begur, which for us is a shining model, an example. I consider it, as I said, jewel of the Archdiocese.
The Shepherd's Voice, which is being presented by our beloved Archbishop, Most Reverend Dr. Peter Machado, the Archbishop of Bangalore, who takes so much of interest and concern in order to bring the various topics, the contextual aspects, in order to inform, educate, and catechize all of us, the priests, the religious, and faithful of this vast archdiocese. And I'm sure you are enjoying this program, Shepherd's Voice, and I request each one of you to share with your other colleagues, friends, and family and relatives, near and dear ones, so that everyone in this archdiocese can be more closer to listen to the Archbishop on this Shepherd's Voice, the weekly feature. My dear friends, as I've always told, that this is a wonderful platform wherein we can connect to the shepherd of this archdiocese, wherein he brings in the interesting topics in order to increase our devotion and love towards God, and also to know the spiritual matters that concerns our faith. In a very special way, you are most welcome to ask your questions, queries, and you can send them to us at archdblr@gmail.com, and you will also see our mobile number in and through which you can connect with our media center, Ave Studios, and the Archdiocesan Communication Center. Please do write to us your feedback, your opinions. Thank you. Continue to watch and continue to share with others.